The great arena was filled with noise. Alien voices shouted and laughed, their words heavy with cruelty. They all looked at the two young alien twins standing in the center, weak and shaking. Nobody believed they could survive tomorrow's deadly trial. The rulers sat high above, smiling with sharp teeth, enjoying the fear of the crowd. The twins were small, thin, and clearly weaker than the other fighters. Their names were Kale and Lyra, brother and sister, born on a poor world forgotten by most. Since childhood they were mocked, told they were useless, told they would never matter. Now they were forced into the arena games, a cruel sport where the weak were thrown to die. The crowd wanted blood, and the rulers promised them blood. But hidden among the shadows of the arena was one man who did not laugh. He was not a warrior, not a leader, not even a fighter. He was only a human janitor, dressed in plain clothes, holding a mop. His name was Daniel. Nobody ever noticed him. Nobody cared about him. He cleaned the floors after battles, wiped away blood, carried broken weapons to storage. To the rulers, he was invisible. To the crowd, he was nothing. But Daniel's eyes were different. He did not see weak twins, he saw something else. He saw children fighting to live. He saw hope trying to survive in the middle of cruelty. That night, Kale and Lyra sat in a dark cell, cold and hungry, their bodies hurt from earlier training. Their hands bleeding from broken weapons, they whispered to each other, their voices trembling. "What if we die tomorrow?" Lyra asked, her eyes wet. Kale tried to sound strong, but his voice broke. "Then at least we will die together." The silence of the cell was heavy, filled with fear and sadness. Then, the door creaked open. The twins gasped, thinking it was the guards, but it was Daniel. He entered quietly. Carrying a small lantern, he placed food on the floor, bread, fruit, and water. The twins stared in shock. "Why are you helping us?" Kyle asked, his voice weak. Daniel looked at them with gentle eyes. "Because I know what it feels like. When the whole world laughs at you," he said softly. "Nobody believes you can win, but I do." His words were simple, yet they cut through the darkness of the cell like light. Lyra shook her head, confused. "You are only a janitor. What can you do?" she whispered. Daniel smiled, tired but warm. "Sometimes the smallest hands can lift the heaviest stones. If the heart is strong," he said. "Tomorrow, use what they do not expect. Do not fight with strength. Fight with your bond. Fight together. Fight smart." The twins listened carefully, every word burning into their minds. For the first time, Kyle and Lyra felt a spark of hope. Someone believed in them, someone saw them as more than weak. It was strange, almost unreal, but it was real enough to give them strength. They ate the food slowly, saving each bite, tears running down their faces. The kindness of one man was greater than all the cruelty of the rulers. Outside the cell, the arena roared as other fights ended in death. The smell of blood was strong in the air. Tomorrow it would be their turn. The rulers already planned the fight. They gave Kale and Lyra broken weapons while their enemies would have sharp blades. It was not a battle. It was an execution. The crowd wanted to see the weak fall, but Daniel's words echoed in their hearts. "I believe in you." That night, as they lay on the cold floor, Kale whispered to his sister, "Do you think we can win?" Lyra held his hand tightly and whispered back, "If even one person believes in us, maybe we can." The lantern's light flickered, and outside, the stars watched silently. The galaxy did not care if two twins lived or died. But in that moment, inside that small dark cell, a promise was born. Daniel returned to his corner of the arena. He sat with his mop, staring at the empty floor. He knew the twins had almost no chance, but he also knew something the rulers had forgotten. He knew the power of belief. He knew that sometimes, hope itself was the sharpest weapon. And so he whispered into the night, "Hold on, kids. Tomorrow, you will show them something they have never seen before." The crowd slept with laughter in their hearts, dreaming of blood. The rulers smiled with confidence, ready to crush hope. But deep in the shadows, a simple janitor prepared to change everything. and two alien twins held onto his words as if they were their last breath. Tomorrow the games would begin, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. The morning sun rose over the alien city, red light falling across the great arena. Crowds gathered in thousands, their voices loud, their faces filled with hunger for violence. Drums pounded, horns blew, banners waved in the hot wind. Everyone came for one reason: to see the weak twins fall. Kale and Lyra stood at the gates of the arena, their hands shaking, their stomachs empty. They had been given armor made of rusted metal, heavy and useless. Their weapons were even worse, one broken sword with a cracked edge, and one wooden spear that bent when touched. It was a cruel joke. The rulers wanted the crowd to laugh. Against them stood two huge reptilian fighters, scales shining like stone, eyes glowing with hunger. They carried sharp axes, clean and polished, their muscles thick and strong. The crowd shouted, "Kill them, end it quickly!" Every alien believed the same thing. The twins were weak, fragile, and useless. They would die in the first fight, just as everyone expected. But hidden in the shadows, Daniel, the janitor, stood with his mop in hand. He whispered to himself, "Remember my words, kids. Fight smart, fight together." The gates opened with a deep rumble. The twins stepped into the blinding light of the arena. The crowd roared with laughter, throwing scraps of food and rocks at them. Kale and Lyra felt fear rise in their hearts, but then they remembered the night before. They remembered Daniel's voice telling them they were more than weak. So they walked forward, side by side, holding their broken weapons with trembling hands. The reptilian fighters moved first, swinging their axes like thunder. The ground shook as blades struck, sparks flying, dust rising. Kyle blocked with his cracked sword, the metal screaming under the impact. Lyra ducked under another blow, the wooden spear almost breaking in half. The crowd laughed louder, shouting that the fight was already over, but the twins did not give up. They remembered Daniel's advice. Do not fight with strength, fight with your bond. So they moved together like two halves of one heart. When Kale stepped forward to block, Lyra slipped behind him and struck. When Lyra stumbled, Kale pulled her back before the enemy could crush her. Their teamwork confused the reptilian warriors who were used to fighting alone. Minutes passed. Sweat poured down their faces, their bodies shaking. Every strike from their enemies was heavy. Every block felt like fire in their arms. But still, they stood. Still, they fought. Still, they refused to fall. Daniel watched, his eyes wide, his chest tight with hope and fear. He whispered, "Yes, yes, that's it. Don't give them your fear, give them your courage." For the first time, the crowd grew quieter, their laughter fading into surprise. The weak twins were not dead. They were still standing, still moving, still fighting. Then came a turning moment. One reptilian fighter lifted his axe high, aiming for Lyra's head. Kale shouted her name, pushed her aside, and raised his broken sword. The blade cracked completely under the force, but it caught the strike just long enough. Lyra rolled to the side, grabbing her spear, and with all her strength she drove it into the enemy's leg. The reptilian warrior howled in pain, collapsing to one knee. The crowd gasped. For the first time, the impossible happened. The twins had struck real damage. The second reptilian charged in fury, swinging his axe wildly. But the twins moved together once more. Kale grabbed the broken sword like a shield, taking the blow on his arm. Pain ripped through him, but he held on. Lyra leapt forward and stabbed the spear into the enemy's chest. The spear cracked, but the tip pierced deep, blood spilling across the sand. The arena went silent. The laughter stopped. The jeers ended. Only silence and shock filled the air. The weak twins had survived the first fight, and even worse for the rulers, they had won it. The announcer's voice shook as he declared, "Victory to Kale and Lyra." The crowd hesitated, unsure what to do, then slowly, some voices began to cheer. Not for cruelty, not for blood, but for hope. The rulers sat in anger, their smiles gone, their eyes burning with rage. This was not the story they had promised. This was not the entertainment they had planned. Kale and Lyra collapsed on their knees, exhausted, breathing hard, blood dripping from their wounds. They looked up at the sky, tears in their eyes, and whispered, "We are still alive." Far away, Daniel wiped his eyes, pride filling his heart. He whispered softly, "You did it, kids. You showed them. You are more than what they think." But deep in the chambers of the rulers, new plans were already forming. The rulers could not allow this hope to spread. They would make the next challenge crueler, harder, deadlier. If the twins survived one fight, then the next would surely break them. The struggle had only just begun, and the galaxy was watching. The arena smelled of smoke and blood. The air was heavy with dust, and the voices of the crowd shook the walls. Everyone shouted the same words: "Kill the twins, make them bleed." The first victory of Kyle and Lyra had shocked the galaxy, but the rulers would not let it happen again. This time the announcer's voice was cold and sharp. "Tonight, the weaklings will face the iron beasts." The gates opened, and two monstrous enemies stepped forward. Their bodies were covered in black armor, claws sharpened like blades, and their faces hidden behind helmets with glowing red eyes. These were not ordinary fighters. They were bred for killing, trained only to destroy. The crowd cheered wildly. Certain the twins' story would end here, Kale and Lyra stood together, their broken weapons still in hand. Their bodies were bruised, their arms weak, but their hearts burned stronger than before. They remembered Daniel's words: "Fight smart, fight together, never give up." And yet when the iron beasts roared, even Kale felt fear crawl up his spine. Could they survive again, or was this the fight that would end them? Daniel stood hidden in the shadows, his mop beside him. He clenched his fists, whispering to himself, "They can do this. They must. Come on, kids, show them who you are." The battle began with thunder. One iron beast charged at Kale, claws swinging fast as lightning. Kale barely raised his broken sword, sparks flying as metal clashed against metal. The power sent him rolling. Across the sand, coughing blood, Lyra screamed his name, but before she could run, the second beast struck her down with a heavy kick. She hit the ground hard, pain ripping through her chest. The crowd laughed, shouting that it was over, that the weaklings should stay down, but Kale pushed himself up, spitting blood. He ran to his sister, pulling her back to her feet. "We don't fall alone," he said, his voice shaking but strong. Together they stood once more, broken weapons raised. The iron beasts circled them like predators hunting prey. The crowd's voices grew louder, demanding death. But Kale and Lyra remembered the night Daniel had given them food and hope. They remembered the way he had looked at them, not as weaklings, but as fighters. That memory gave them fire. And so when the first beast charged again, the twins moved as one. Kale blocked the claws, his arms screaming with pain. At the same time, Lyra darted forward and stabbed the beast's side with her cracked spear. The weapon broke in half, but the sharp edge pierced the armor. The beast roared in pain, stumbling back. Gasps filled the arena. Blood had been spilled. The second beast rushed in fury, but Kale caught its leg with his broken sword. The blade shattered completely, but it slowed the beast's step. Lyra grabbed the broken spear's tip and drove it deep into the beast's arm. The crowd screamed in shock. The twins had drawn first blood. For the first time, silence fell over the arena. The laughter stopped, replaced by fear and confusion. How could the weak twins hurt the unstoppable iron beasts? The rulers sat stiffly on their high thrones, their smiles gone, their eyes sharp with anger. This was not what they wanted. This was not the story they had promised. Kyle and Lyra stood, panting, their bodies weak, their weapons broken. But their eyes burned with fire. They had proved something greater than strength. They had proved they could wound even the most powerful. Daniel's chest tightened with pride, his voice a whisper lost in the crowd. "Yes, kids, yes, make them remember you. Make them see." But the battle was not over. The wounded beasts roared louder than ever, their fury shaking the ground. They charged together, faster, stronger, filled with rage. Kyle and Lyra braced themselves, standing side by side. They were out of weapons, their arms weak, but their bond held firm. If they had to die, they would die together. And yet, in their hearts, they knew something had changed. For the first time, the crowd did not see them as prey. They saw them as fighters. The beasts struck, claws tearing the sand. Kale and Lyra dodged, barely escaping death. They fought with whatever they had left. Stones, broken metal, even their bare hands. The fight raged on, long and brutal, blood spilling across the ground, but no matter how many times they fell, they stood again. No matter how much pain they took, they refused to stay down. When the final bell rang, the arena was covered in dust and silence. The iron beasts stood wounded, their armor cracked, their blood staining the sand. The twins stood too, bruised and bleeding, but still alive. The announcer hesitated, his voice trembling. Victory to Kale and Lyra. The crowd erupted, not in laughter this time, but in wild shouts of disbelief. Some even cheered, their voices rising for the underdogs who refused to die. The rulers sat in fury, their claws digging into the arms of their thrones. This was dangerous, too dangerous. Hope had been born in the arena, and hope was a fire they could not allow to spread. Kale and Lyra looked at each other, their hands clasped, their eyes filled with tears. They had survived again. They had spilled first blood, and deep in the shadows, Daniel whispered with pride, "This is only the beginning." The arena was never silent, but tonight the noise was different. It was not only laughter, not only cruelty, but something new. Whispers spread among the crowd, whispers that carried fear and wonder. Did you see the twins? They hurt the iron beasts. They should have died, but they are still alive. For the first time, hope had entered the air, and the rulers hated it. In the hidden corners, Daniel leaned on his mop, his face tired but glowing with pride. He had seen the twins fight with nothing but courage and teamwork. He had seen the moment when the crowd gasped in shock, and he knew something the rulers did not want to admit. The galaxy had just witnessed a seed of change. Kale and Lyra sat in their dark cell once more, their bodies bruised and bloody, their weapons gone, their armor broken, their hands trembling, but their hearts beat faster, filled with a strange fire. They looked at each other and whispered the same words, "We are still alive." For them, those words were more powerful than any weapon. That night Daniel came again, carrying bandages, herbs, and small bottles of human medicine. He knelt beside them, cleaning their wounds carefully. The twins winced but smiled through the pain. "Why do you risk this?" Lyra asked softly, her eyes shining with tears. "If the guards catch you, they will kill you." Daniel gave a small smile, his voice steady. "Because nobody else will stand for you, and because I believe you are stronger than you know." Kale gripped Daniel's hand tightly, his voice hoarse. "Then we will fight, not just for us, but for you too." The next battles came quickly, harder and crueler than before. The rulers threw beast after beast at the twins, hoping to break them. But every time, the twins survived. They used speed instead of strength, teamwork instead of power. When Kale blocked, Lyra attacked. When Lyra stumbled, Kale lifted her. Their bond became their weapon, sharper than any blade. The crowd began to change. At first they had laughed, mocking the weak. But now some voices cheered for the twins. Others shouted their names. The rulers tried to silence the crowd, but the fire had already started. The weak were not falling, the weak were rising, and the galaxy was watching. One evening, after another long fight, Kyle and Lyra limped back to their cell, their bodies covered in cuts, their faces pale with exhaustion. Daniel was waiting, his eyes full of worry. "You cannot keep fighting like this," he whispered. "They will keep making it harder until you cannot stand." Kyle looked up, his voice calm. "Then we will keep standing until our last breath." Daniel's chest ached with both pride and fear. He knew the rulers would never allow them to live for long. But he also knew something had already changed inside the twins. They no longer fought to survive. They fought to prove a truth. Days turned into weeks, and the twins grew sharper, faster, braver. The other fighters began to avoid their eyes, whispering in fear, "Those two are not weak anymore. Something protects them." Even the guards grew uneasy. Every battle that was meant to kill them only made them stronger. Every cruel trap only gave them more courage. In the grand chambers, the rulers met in anger. "They must be broken," one hissed. They give the people ideas. Another growled. If the crowd believes the weak can rise, they will start to rebel. The leader slammed his claw against the stone table. Then we will send them against the champion, the one who has never been defeated. The others nodded, their faces dark with hate. It was decided. The twins' next fight would not be survival, it would be certain death. Meanwhile, Daniel heard the whispers of the new challenge. His hands shook as he scrubbed the floors. He knew the champion's name. He had seen the trail of bodies left behind. No one had lasted more than a minute against him. How could two bruised, exhausted children stand against that? And yet, when Daniel looked into Kale and Lyra's eyes, he saw no fear. He saw determination. He saw belief. He saw the fire he had planted growing brighter. That night, as the three sat together in the cell, the twins spoke. "Daniel, if we fall, promise us one thing," Lyra whispered. "Promise. You will remember us. Promise you will tell someone that we tried." Daniel's throat tightened, his voice rough with emotion. "I promise more than that. I promise you will not fall. Because tomorrow, you will do what no one believes." Kale placed his hand on Daniel's shoulder. "We will fight, not for glory, not for the crowd, but for you, and for us." Outside, the arena thundered with preparations. The champion was sharpening his blades, ready for blood. The rulers smiled once more, certain of victory. The galaxy held its breath. The next battle would decide everything. Would hope survive, or would it be crushed forever? The night before the great battle was heavy with silence. Even the guards whispered, their eyes full of unease. The twins were no longer seen as helpless prey. They were whispers of danger, of hope. But the rulers had planned the final blow. They had chosen the champion, the undefeated warrior, the terror of the arena. His name was Drax, a giant creature with skin like stone and eyes like fire. He stood taller than any fighter, his muscles thick like steel ropes. In his hands were two curved blades, sharp enough to cut through armor. No one had ever survived his fight. No one had ever made him bleed. The crowd worshipped him, chanting his name again and again. Drax, Drax, Drax. Kale and Lyra sat in their cell, listening to the sound of drums outside. Lyra's hands shook, her heart racing. "Kyle, what if this is the end?" she whispered. Kyle looked at her, his jaw tight. "Then we will end standing, not crawling." But his own eyes carried fear. They both knew this was no ordinary battle. This was death wearing a crown. Daniel entered quietly, carrying bread and water. His face was pale, his hands trembling. "I heard them. They are sending you against the champion," he whispered. The twins looked at him, silent, waiting. Daniel sat down on the floor, his voice breaking. "Listen to me. I cannot fight for you. I cannot shield you, but I can give you this. Remember who you are. Remember that your bond is stronger than his blades. You are not alone. You are never alone." Lyra touched his hand, her voice steady. "You believe in us, Daniel. And because of that, we will fight." For the first time, Daniel's eyes filled with tears. He nodded, whispering, "Then go show them what belief can do." The morning came with thunderous roars. The arena was more crowded than ever. Creatures from across the galaxy came to watch the champion's glory. The rulers sat high above, their claws resting on their thrones, smiles wide and cruel. The announcer's voice echoed, "Today the weaklings face the champion. Today the game ends." The gates opened, and Drax walked out. Every step was heavy, shaking the ground. His red eyes burned as he raised his blades to the sky. The crowd exploded with cheers. And then the second gate opened. Kale and Lyra stepped forward, their broken armor strapped together with rope, holding rusted weapons. The crowd laughed at the sight, certain it would be quick. Drax pointed his blade at them, his voice like thunder. "You are insects. I will crush you, and the crowd will forget you." Kyle stood tall, his voice hoarse but firm. "Then crush us, if you can." The bell rang, and the champion moved like lightning. One swing of his blade nearly cut Kale in half. Kale rolled away just in time. The second blade slammed into the sand where Lyra stood, dust exploding into the air. The twins split apart, circling him, searching for a weakness, but Drax was too fast, too strong. His strikes filled the air with death. Every movement forced them back, every block shook their bones. The crowd roared, laughing, cheering for Drax. But Daniel stood silent in the shadows, whispering, "Hold on, kids. Don't give up. Find the opening." Cale stumbled, his sword cracking under another blow. Drax laughed, the sound deep and cruel. "You cannot win. You cannot even stand." Lyra charged from the side, her spear stabbing at his ribs. But the champion caught it with one hand and snapped it in two. He kicked her across the sand, her body rolling until she coughed blood. The crowd cheered wildly. The rulers smiled. It seemed finished. But Cale ran to his sister, lifting her up. He whispered through his tears, "We are not finished, we are not broken." Lyra gripped his hand, nodding weakly. Together they stood once more, side by side. The champion frowned, annoyed. He charged again, blades flashing. But this time, the twins moved differently. Cale blocked one strike, letting the blade break his shield. At the same time, Lyra rolled behind Drax and grabbed a shard of her broken spear. With a scream, she drove it into his leg. Blood sprayed across the sand. The champion roared in pain, stumbling for the first time. The crowd gasped, silence cutting through the arena. The undefeated champion had been wounded. Cale and Lyra pressed on, striking together, one heart, one rhythm. Every blow they gave was small, but each one cut deeper, and soon, the mighty Drax fell to one knee. Daniel's heart pounded, his whisper turning into a shout. "Yes, yes, finish it. Show them hope cannot die." The twins raised their broken weapons one last time. Together they struck the champion down. The arena exploded with sound. Some screamed in rage, some cried in shock, others cheered with wild voices. The rulers sat frozen, their smiles shattered. Their champion had fallen, and two weaklings had done it. Cale and Lyra stood panting, covered in blood and dust, their hands gripping each other. They had defeated the undefeated. They had broken the chains of fear. Daniel wiped his eyes, whispering, with pride, "You did it, kids, you showed them the truth." But high above, the rulers leaned close, their voices sharp with fury. "They cannot live. Kill them in the night. End this hope before it spreads." The crowd might cheer. The people might whisper. But the rulers had already chosen their next move. The fight was won, but the war had only just begun. The arena still echoed with the memory of the champion's fall. Crowds across the galaxy whispered the names of the twins, Cale and Lyra. For the first time, the weak had defeated the strongest. But hope is a dangerous seed, and the rulers would not let it grow. High above, in their dark chambers, the rulers spoke with rage. "They have turned the crowd, they have made them believe," one hissed. "If we let them live, rebellion will rise," another growled. The leader slammed his claw against the stone table, his voice sharp as knives. "Then they will not live. Tonight we end them." That night, Kyle and Lyra lay in their cold cell, exhausted but smiling. Faintly, their bodies were broken, their clothes torn, but their hearts burned with pride. "We did it, Lyra," Cale whispered. "We beat the champion." Lyra leaned against him, her voice soft. "We are still alive, brother, and because of that, anything is possible." They did not know the danger already walking toward them in the shadows. Daniel knew. He had overheard the guards whispering about the order. The twins would not live until morning. They would be executed in the dark. Daniel's chest tightened with fear, his hands trembling as he gripped his mop like a weapon. He had been nothing but a janitor, a man forgotten, invisible. But tonight, invisibility could save lives. The cell door creaked, open, and footsteps echoed in the hallway. Not one, not two, but many armed guards stepped inside, their faces hard, their blades gleaming. The leader of the group sneered, "The rulers send their regards, weaklings. You will not see the sunrise." Kyle and Lyra froze, their hearts pounding. They had no weapons, no strength left to fight, Lyra whispered. "Is this how it ends?" Kyle took her hand, whispering back, "Then we will face it together." But before the guards could strike, A shadow moved. Daniel stepped forward, his mop raised like a spear. "Not tonight," he growled, his voice shaking but fierce. The guards laughed. "A janitor, you think you can stop us?" Daniel's eyes burned with a fire they had never seen. "I cleaned your blood from these floors for years. I saw every cruelty, every death. And I said nothing, not anymore." With a roar, he swung his mop, knocking one guard back. The yow. Twins gasped, watching the man they thought was powerless fight like a storm. Daniel grabbed a wrench from his belt and smashed it into another guard's helmet, sparks flying. But there were too many. Their blades sharp, their armor heavy. Daniel fought with everything he had, his arms bleeding, his breath ragged. Every strike he took for the twins. Every wound was a shield between them and death. Cale shouted, "Daniel!" his voice breaking. But Daniel only yelled back, "Run when you can. Don't waste this chance." The twins tried to rise, but their legs shook, their bodies weak. Still they could not leave him. They picked up broken chains from the floor and swung them wildly, striking at the guards. Together, the three of them pushed back against the tide. But the guards were many, and soon Daniel stumbled, a blade cutting across his side. He fell to one knee, blood pouring, his face pale. Lyra screamed, rushing to him. "No, Daniel, please, no." Daniel looked at her with weak eyes, his voice soft but steady. "You are stronger than me, stronger than all of them. Promise me you will fight. Promise me you will not give up." Cale gripped his hand, tears falling. "We promise." The guards closed in, their anger fierce. But the sound of heavy boots echoed down the hall. More voices shouted. The noise of the crowd outside had grown. Louder, angry, restless. The rulers had not expected this. The people were demanding to see the twins, demanding to know the truth. The guards hesitated, unsure, and in that moment of hesitation, the twins pulled Daniel to the corner, hiding him in the shadows. Blood stained the floor, smoke filled the air. But Cale and Lyra stood tall. Their eyes were no longer filled with fear, but with fury. They had seen the man who was called nothing stand against blades for them. They had seen belief turn into sacrifice, and they swore they would not waste it. The guards growled, stepping back as the crowd outside grew louder. "Tomorrow, the final battle." One spat. "Tomorrow, you will not escape." Then they retreated, leaving only silence, the echo of boots fading into the dark. Cale and Lyra held Daniel in their arms, his breath shallow, his skin pale. Tears ran down their faces as Lyra whispered, "We will fight, Daniel. Not just for us, but for you." Daniel gave a weak smile, his voice breaking. "Good. Because tomorrow the galaxy will watch and you will show them who you really are." The night was long, filled with pain and fear. But deep in that cell, a new promise was born. The final battle was coming, and the weak would rise again. The dawn rose heavy over the alien city. The sky burned red, as if the universe itself prepared for blood. Crowds poured into the arena from every corner of the galaxy. The whispers of the twins' victories had spread far, and now everyone wanted to see the end. Would the weak finally fall, or would they rise beyond all reason? Cale and Lyra stood at the gates, their bodies wrapped in bandages, their faces pale but steady. Beside them, hidden in the shadows, Daniel leaned weakly against the wall, his side bleeding, his strength fading. He could not fight, but his eyes shone with fire. "You are not fighting only for yourselves," he whispered, his voice thin, but strong. "You fight for every weak voice that was silenced, for every soul crushed by their laughter. Today you show the galaxy the truth." The gates opened with a thunderous crack. The arena roared like a storm. At the center stood the final challenge. Not beasts, not champions, but a circle of death. Dozens of elite guards, armored in black steel, armed with blades that gleamed. Under the sun, it was not a fair fight. It was slaughter dressed as a game. The rulers sat above, their eyes cold, their smiles sharp. "Let this end forever," the leader whispered. Cale and Lyra stepped forward, their broken weapons in hand. The crowd shouted, some in anger, some in support, their voices clashing like fire and thunder. The announcer's voice echoed, "Today the games end. Today hope dies." The bell rang, and the guards charged. Steel clashed against steel, Sparks flew through the air. Kale blocked one strike, his arm screaming with pain. Lyra ducked under another, swinging her chain into a guard's face. The crowd gasped as the first enemy fell, blood spraying across the sand. The rulers leaned forward furious. "Kill them! Kill them now!" they hissed. The twins moved like one, faster than before. Every strike was not only strength, it was survival. It was belief. Kale's sword shattered into pieces, but he grabbed the shards and used them as knives. Lyra's chain wrapped around an enemy's throat, pulling him to the ground. Together they carved a path through the wall of steel, but there were too many, and soon Kyle staggered, a blade cutting across his chest. He fell to his knees, blood pouring. Lyra screamed his name, rushing to cover him. The guards circled, blades raised, ready to strike them down. Then, a sound rose from the crowd. It was not laughter, not cruelty, but a chant. "Fight, fight, fight." Voices from every corner of the arena shouted together, "Rise, rise, rise." The rulers froze, their faces pale. The people were no longer hungry for death. They were hungry for hope. Kale lifted his head, his eyes filled with fire. Lyra pulled him up, her voice steady. "We are not fighting alone anymore." With one last cry, they charged again, their broken weapons striking like thunder. One guard fell, then another, then another. The sand turned red with blood, but the twins refused to stop. Every step they took echoed with the voice of the crowd. Daniel pressed against the bars of the gate, his voice breaking as he shouted, "Yes, yes, you can do this. Make them see, make them remember." Finally, only one guard remained, his blade trembling in his hand. The twins stood before him, their bodies covered in wounds, their eyes burning with unbroken fire. The guard looked at them, then at the crowd, and dropped his weapon to the ground. The arena exploded with sound, the people cheering wildly. The rulers shouted in rage, but it was too late. The weak had won. Kale and Lyra fell to their knees, exhausted. They looked up at the sky, their tears mixing with blood and sweat. For the first time, they felt truly free. Daniel stumbled toward them, his body weak, his face pale. He knelt beside them, his hand trembling as he touched their shoulders. "I told you," he whispered, his voice soft. "You could win." The twins clung to him, their tears falling. "You gave us strength, Daniel. You gave us belief." The crowd shouted their names again, and again. Kale, Lyra, Kale, Lyra. The rulers tried to silence them, but their voices were drowned in the storm. The galaxy had seen something it could not unsee. The weak had risen, and hope had won. That night, when the arena was finally empty, Daniel sat with the twins under the stars. His breath was shallow, his wounds deep, but his eyes were full of peace. "You will go on," he whispered. "The galaxy will remember you, and maybe they will remember me too." Kale and Lyra held his hands, their voices steady. "They will remember all of us, forever." And so, the story of two alien twins and the human janitor who believed became legend. A story whispered in every corner of the galaxy. A story that said one truth clearly. Sometimes, the smallest light can burn brighter than any star,